Yellow Purple Croc is probably one of the most fun leaders to play, especially if you like ramping and playing big, huge threats and silly combo shenanigans. This is definitely your guy. We're going to talk about the deck list that I've been running, as well as some strategy for playing this deck. Let's take a look at the leader first. This is the Yellow Purple Crocodile. He is a 4-life leader, 5,000 power. And his effect reads, once per turn on my opponent's turn, whenever a Dawn card on my field is returned to my Dawn deck by one of my own effects, I can add up to 1 Dawn from my Dawn deck onto my field and set it as active. So this synergizes really well with abilities that like counter effects and trigger effects that -1 Dawn, because this immediately gets you that Dawn back and sets it as active. So if you wanted to like potentially use an event to counter out of something that minuses a Dawn, it also sets up a Dawn back for you. So you can potentially combo it and get multiple events. There are some effects in this deck that also let you ramp Dawn on your opponent's turn. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck list here. We're going to start with the 2Ks. We've got 11 2Ks in this list. We're running 4 of Capone Gang Beige. He is the best 2K in yellow up to this date. He can trigger and basically stop a leader or character from attacking for that turn, so he can definitely be very clutch if he's your last life or second to last life to stop your opponent from going for game. Really, really awesome card, and we definitely want to run 4 of those. Next, we've got Miss Doublefinger. She is the other 4 of that we're running. This is a searchable 2K. It is also a 2K that you can play out on your 4 Dawn turn, allowing you to trash a card from your hand and ramp 1 Dawn. So she's also a ramp target. So she also can come out of life off of a trigger, which is pretty great as well. So she can come out of life, set up a Dawn, and then ramp you too. And again, we run the Baroque Work Searcher in this deck, so she's a searchable 2K. Finally, we have the Frankie from Egghead. This is the 07 Frankie. Just another really solid 2K. If I have 1 life or less, when I trigger this, I get to draw a card and I get to play him out if I have 1 life or less, but I get to draw a card regardless. Just a really great body. It's a 5K body that I can put right into play to try to like push a lethal on a turn that I survive a potential lethal push. Next, let's look at the main engine of this deck, and that's the Baroque Works engine. So we're running 4 of Miss Valentine here. Miss Valentine allows you to search the top 5 for a Baroque Works cards. She can also find herself, so you can combo her into herself if you don't see anything else in the top 5 that you want to grab, and then potentially search again. She's also a triggerable searcher, so you can Dawn -1 and put her straight into play and search for something. This comes in really clutch off your life if you're trying to look for a specific piece for either next turn or a 2K like Miss Doublefinger to potentially get out of an attack. Really great card. Next, we've got one of the new options that came with EBO1, and that is Miss Wednesday. Miss Wednesday is a blocker. She's a 4K blocker for 3, and on your opponent's attack, once per turn, I can minus a Dawn and then set up a Dawn, and then I get to set up another Dawn for my leader. So when my opponent attacks me, I basically ramp, which is really awesome. It allows me to get to my 8, 9, and 10 Dawn a lot faster, like a whole turn faster, which allows me to drop all my big boys. Really great card. It's also just a blocker. Then one of the best inclusions for ramping in this deck is the Mr. 2 Bon Clay here. For 4 Dawn, you can play him out, and he sets up a Dawn from your Dawn deck as active, and then he can also copy the base power of characters that your opponent controls when he attacks. So it's a great play into decks like NL and stuff like that play a lot of big boys. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of the mid game as well. So when you're not ramping, what else are you doing? Well, you're potentially killing things. So I like to play this deck a little bit more like Anel, right? So Anel is typically starving things and then KOing things, and that's where I'm playing 4 Gadatsus. So Gadatsu basically comes into play. He's a 5-cost 6,000 power with 1K counter, and then he can KO up to one of my opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than my opponent's life total. So he's a great play in the mid game. If I'm keeping my opponent's life high, I can KO 4 drops, or even 5 drops potentially if it's a 5-life leader. Then finally we have Kiku Nojo. So this is kind of the opposite side of this. So in matchups where I want to starve, I'm playing out this, and then this isn't necessarily triggering, but this is great in the late game. So Kiku Nojo is a 4-cost 6,000 power character, no counter, but when on KO, if my opponent has 3 or less life cards, I get to gain 1 life. And then if I can trigger this card out if my opponent has 3 or less life as well. So this has a really good combo with one of the events that we'll see later in the explanation here. So that's kind of what this card's for. Also, if your opponent's being really aggressive and you're trying to be really aggressive, this is just a great body to play out and attack, because if they attack it, it's going to gain you a life. Then finally, let's get to the big boss monsters of the deck here. We've got Crocodile. Crocodile is one of the best boss monsters in this deck. He's an 8-cost, 9,000 power character. On play, you -2 Dawn, and then he heals you. So he adds the top card of your deck to your life. And then on my opponent's attack, once per turn, I can -1 Dawn and then draw 1 card and discard 1 card. So one of the issues that some decks like these have running a bunch of high drops is sometimes your hand gets really clunky. You don't have a lot of counter in hand. He allows you to cycle 1 card in your hand every time your opponent attacks once per turn, which is pretty great. So there's no condition for healing on this card, so you could play him when you're at 4 life and go up to 5. Really great. Next, we've got another, one of the best boss monsters, in general, if you're playing a deck like this, and that's Yamato. So Yamato, 9,000 power, 9-cost character. On play, KO one of my opponent's characters that has a cost equal to or less than the total of both my life and my opponent's life. And then if I have 1 or less life, I can gain a life. So just a really great curve. This card is really great in the starving situation where you're starving out your opponent and then you're taking hits, so you'll heal yourself and also be able to kill at most maybe a 4 or 5 drop with this card. This card's really great at sustaining you. Then finally, we're running 2 of the 10-cost aces here from OP07. 10-cost, 10,000 power. On play, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to your life, so you can heal yourself. And then if you have 2 or less life, he gains Rush. So a 10,000 character that can attack immediately, very strong at controlling the board and also gaining you life. Then finally, let's take a look at the events here. These are kind of the bread and butter that also help this deck pop off, and that is the Oh Come My Way. This is an event you'll literally only see in Crocodile style decks, because this event is type restricted to Baroque Works character or leaders. For 1 Dawn, you can -1 Dawn on your opponent's attack, and if your leader is of type Baroque Works, you can select one of your characters and change the target of the attack to the selected character. So this basically, for 1 Dawn and -ing a Dawn, lets you turn any character on your board into a blocker, whether it's rested or active. I could turn a 9-cost into my 9,000 into a blocker and just eat the attack and nothing happens. I could also, and this is kind of the big combo of the deck, turn my Kiku Nojo into the blocker, and so I would gain a life on their attack. So they would hit me, I would play this, it would go there instead, it would die, I would gain a life, which is a pretty strong combo. So this is just great at instantly turning anything into a blocker. To allow you to survive. Because this does -1 Dawn, it triggers your Crocodile's leader ability, which allows you to set up another Dawn, so you could technically cast 2 of these with 1 Dawn open, which is really awesome. Then, because yellow triggers are busted, we're going to play 3 of You're the One Who Should Disappear. So this is 0-cost event that allows you to trash 1 card from your hand and then give your leader or character plus 3,000 power. And then the trigger is kind of the big thing. So if you have 0 life cards, you can add 1 card. You can basically heal 1 and then discard 1 card from your hand. Really good to trigger, especially on 0. Then, getting to the end here, we've got 2 tech cards here. This is, or actually 2 copies of a tech card. This is Conqueror of 3 Worlds, Ragnaroku. This is from EBO1. This is it's a 5-cost, Dawn -1, KO up to one of my opponent's characters with a cost of 8 or less. So this is just in there for Gecko Moria, for Isho, for any really annoying threat that I can't kill with some of my removal, or I can't get through, right? So this is just a great way to just deal with those threats. This also kills 8-cost Kid in the Bonnie matchup, stuff like that. Just a nice little tech choice that I like to run. It also triggers and ramps me 1. So even if I hit this out of life and I don't need it, it's still gonna get me 1 Dawn closer to doing what I need to do. And that is the list. When we go to matchups wise, so this deck, because I've kind of teched it a little bit more to be better against aggro potentially, it actually fares potentially pretty well into decks like Blue Doflamingo. Red Purple Law is a very hard matchup, but that deck is about to get banned anyways, so it doesn't really matter. And then this deck can sometimes beat an L just because This allows you to keep cycling your hand. You're kind of running like a very similar top end. Now your top end isn't as heavy, right? Because Enel typically runs 12 high cost characters, but you can get to them faster, right? Ramping, you can ramp and be a turn ahead of Enel to get your characters out faster, which is pretty darn strong as well. This little combo here is or this little combo with this card is just nasty. Against Lucci, if they have stage, which Lucci won't have stage for much longer, that'll allow them to get up to the amount of values to be able to KO your big drops. But if you can just keep slamming your big drops, ramping up, you also have like the mid game as well. You could potentially give you like a decent matchup into Lucci, especially like in a post stage world. Bonnie is not too bad. You do kind of lose to 9-cost Zoro with this build. This is one thing that Enel has over this specific deck, is Enel allows you to run, like you can run Kingdom Come. This deck could also run Kingdom Come, but typically you don't want to be willingly trashing life if necessary. You could potentially swap out these two Ragnaroks with Kingdom Come to be able to kill anything, which would make you even better into the Bonnie matchup. And then Black Yellow Luffy is kind of like a crapshoot. If you potentially resolve a bunch of threats and gain a bunch of life before they can really kill you, like you could potentially do something to help. But a lot of your effects KO, and if they just keep doing sabos, this card is basically useless. It's used for Moria, but if they keep doing sabos, you can't use it anyways. So that's a hard matchup in general for decks like this. But overall, this deck is really fun, and it's going to get even better in OP08. I'll probably release an OP08 list in the future here because we're getting some new cards like 9-cost Big Bomb, which is going to be a great addition to this deck because it basically heals you and then also deals with a threat, which is pretty nice. And we also get like 5-cost Nami, which will allow us to KO 5 costs, and pretty much we're getting rid of Gadatsu because this deck does run quite a few triggers as well. With that in mind, thanks for watching, everybody. And if you enjoy this type of content and like to see more deck lists in the future or see gameplay for this, definitely make sure you like the video and subscribe. Thanks, everybody.